Bergen-Fischer Media.
Hey, it's Monday, here we go. It's the Call Me Tony Show.
Hey guys, it is Monday, October 13th, 2025, Canadian Thanksgiving. My name is Tony. This is my podcast, and welcome to it. So, at the risk of sounding like an old man yelling at clouds, it seems to be where my head is at lately. I'm going to keep on building on what I talked about last week. I was talking about how the internet sucks, the modern internet. So I basically canceled myself. I can't cancel every other stupid thing that's going on online, but I can choose to unplug. And for the most part, that's what I'm trying to do. Yes, I see the hypocrisy and the irony in claiming to have unplugged from the modern internet while actively posting content to it. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, like what's my workaround there? And as of today, because I'm posting the video here to YouTube and the audio podcast to the regular audio host, obviously I haven't found workaround solutions for that yet. But I'm hoping that I will. It's like the last week I've been thinking about how, if you'd met me 20 years ago, you would have met somebody who was really, really proud to be way ahead of the curve. Somebody who wanted to be on the bleeding edge of new tech, as far as like, okay, what's the newest device? Even if I couldn't afford it, I wanted to know every single thing about it. For the things I owned and the things I hope to own, I wanted to know every update, every feature, every new thing that was coming or that was out before anybody else. But lately, I've felt myself going in a different direction. Like I've started to hate the world that I helped to build by actually showing my love for this tech. And it's not just about the devices or the software. It's how the whole system of connection feels like it's turned against the people that it was meant to connect. Now, before I get started, you may notice that my audio feels a little bit crap. And that's because it's like I'm tired of all the digital processing. I'm tired of just stuff in general, so I'm using just the cheapest kind of tech. There's no smart features, there's no interference from external sources. It's just my voice coming through to my computer. And if that sounds off, I can live with that. Also gives me a little bit more freedom to move. I don't have to be like so close, like right up in the camera, like right in my desk. Anyways, I want to talk about the early days of tech, like not, in general. I mean, just from my own personal perspective and from my own experience, because like I was a little bit late to the table as far as the internet community and things like that. I mean, I was listening to cassettes and vinyl when the world had moved on to CDs. I was still listening to cassettes and vinyl when people had moved on to MP3s. It was a really, really big step for me to take the plunge. But once I took the plunge, holy crap, like I was all in. And like using the music technology as a first-hand example, it's like I still love the idea of laying down a record, putting the needle on it. I like the idea of popping a cassette into a Walkman. But what I got when I got my first MP3 player was freedom, like actual, tangible, measurable freedom not just in like what I could explore, but freedom from having to lug around all this stuff with me. Like I wasn't having to carry a bag with cassettes or like a CD binder or any of that. It's like I could fit most of the music I plan to listen to, if not all the music, on my MP3 player itself, and whatever didn't fit directly on there, I could fit onto an expansion card, effectively carrying my entire music library everywhere I went in something that was a fraction of the size of the device I used to use just to play the music. Never mind like the actual music media itself. So, when people talk about like the freedom afforded by technology, I mean, it's really really easy to get caught in really really vague ideas, vague language like that. But I mean, like this is like a really personal thing for a lot of us, and when I got onto the internet, especially like when I started like diving into that instead of just like having people help me get music onto my music player, ripping my CDs on a computer, like just fully embracing the online compute community. It felt like I had walked through like the Stargate, right? Like into this totally alien world where it just suddenly like the rules didn't totally apply anymore. There wasn't as much holding me back, whereas when I was a kid, if we wanted to communicate with somebody on the other side of the world, we had to, I don't even remember how we used to find these people, but we'd have a pen pal, and it would be months in between sending a letter and getting a response, but we communicate like one on one across oceans and borders and boundaries and across cultures and sometimes even languages because translators would get involved. And it still felt like just talking to that one kid in another country. It felt like my world had really shrunk, but in a good way. Now, compared to the internet, where you can connect everybody to everybody else, like that just seemed like a really, really exciting thing. And I loved it. There was curiosity. A lot of people, they like to do these studies talking about like how follower account affects the way we interact socially, or how downloading or interacting with certain apps affects our dopamine levels. But for me, it wasn't about that, at least not at the beginning. It was just about like exploring that curiosity about others. And whenever I would see a new update, I would think, okay, like these updates, these security patches, whatever, these are the things that are going to keep me safe while I'm interacting in this wonderful new world. There would be new features added that would make it easier to communicate with these new relationships I'd made. They'd open the doors to create even more new relationships. Like when before social media as we know it, when people had um, like those like message boards where people could just like post back and forth and everything was kind of public, you were unified by subject matter. And sometimes, like you'd be on a, like for me, I spent a lot of time on a message board that was all about Rolling Stones content. And then I'd find out, okay, from there was people that were into other things I was interested in. And then we'd split off into these like little subgroups where I'd meet more people there. And it just seemed like every connection to another person led to connections with more people, which, like the modern social media, it's like you make these connections, but it's kind of like you just putting a little mark on the wall, but you're not really connecting. You're not really interacting in most cases. It's just like, okay, I've elevated my friend count. And, what's it really done to serve me? But I don't feel that same kind of excitement anymore when I see a new update and when I hear about the next, innovation. I'm not like filled with awe and wonder anymore. I'm just like, I'm freaking tired. And the reason I'm tired is because it seems like every new update introduces something intrusive that's being snuck in underneath the surface, something to not just spy on me. Because I think like in 2025, I'm used to being spied on. Like some of the technology I've allowed into my own home that I purchased, like intentionally purchased are things that are designed to serve me by spying on me. Like my smart speaker, which, it's next on the chopping block. I mean, it was just supposed to be a fancy light switch. Now it's bringing advertising into my bedroom. But, this is the kind of thing that we do to ourselves. We intentionally volunteer to be spied on. And like I said, to some degree, I can handle that. Because if you know what I'm all about, then you can help me do the things that I want to do. But what I don't like is when I got to worry that an update is going to take the information that I've conceded to make available to these companies, and they're going to use it to exploit me. They're going to use it to serve me more personalized ads. They're going to pick on my insecurities to try to not just sell me things for dollars, but to manipulate the way I vote, to manipulate the way I think, to manipulate the way that I hate to refer to myself as like a public personality, because it's like, I don't carry enough fame for that, but I am a personality in public. I mean, maybe my voice reaches a couple more people than somebody who doesn't podcast. I don't know. But the algorithm doesn't know that. And it's just like, it's trying to get me to say things that maybe like I don't really think. And most of us, I think to some degree, as much as we like to think that we're really, really strong willed, we've become, I think, a lot more suggestible than we would like to be. And I'm sick of these. I don't know. It's not entertaining. Like if you go to to see a hypnotist and you get made to cluck like a chicken, it's like you have a good laugh, you move on with your day, and like your friends have got a great story to tell, maybe a funny video, but it's like I'm clucking like a chicken in ways that are screwing me over. They're just destroying every aspect of my life that actually matters to me. We've never been more connected, and yet I've never seen so many people who feel isolated, including myself. I had, before I canceled my social media accounts, I had connections to literally like thousands of people, like thousands of digital friends, but I was having so few actual conversations, or I had like, well, I guess I still have available to me. I'm just not using them. All these platforms that are supposedly designed for self-expression, but they don't allow space for honesty. You've got to be so careful about what you say, how you say it, and who you say it to. And like, I'm not saying that I want to reserve the right to be an asshole, but at the same time, it's just like, I want to know that if I say something that bothers you as an individual, that you as an individual can come back to me and say, hey, this is why I'm bothered by what you said, and you and I can have a conversation and sort it out. But when a third party who isn't involved in the exchange between you and I is constantly eavesdropping, and in this case, it's not even like a human third party, it's like an AI third party, is eavesdropping on every interaction we have with each other and deciding what's offensive and what's not. Even if every human who's involved in the conversation is totally okay with the tone of the way things are going on, it doesn't quite follow the rules. The algorithm that polices us decides that, you know what, we can see that you're being honest, but we don't care, because that type of honesty is not allowed on this type of platform. And unfortunately, because these types of platforms are where we meet each other, they're where we maintain our relationships, like really the only place where we actually see each other is on these platforms. When an outside party starts determining what our interactions are like, where is the space for the actual connection? Where is the space even for the expression? And like, this is one of the things that drove me away, which is like keeps on pushing me away from the digital space. Like my last podcast episode was a couple of weeks ago. I like to record every Monday, but like last Monday when I was like sitting here looking at my computer and looking at my notes, it just like the whole idea of recording something, expressing myself, it triggered like a massive anxiety attack, because I don't know, like, is this even what I want to do? Who's going to be offended this week? Like I don't mind hate mail. Hate mail I welcome because I mean, if somebody gets pissed off by something I've said, it means I've touched something in them. It means that they've actually heard me. Maybe they haven't understood me, but they've heard me, and that's cool. That means that like I'm not just speaking into the void. But when I catch a strike from an algorithm because I said something that bothered somebody, I used a word that the algorithm didn't like, that violated the terms of service, that's something I struggle to live with. And if I end up like having this channel canceled, I mean, whatever, it's not like I'm monetized anyways. I don't have anywhere close to enough reach for that on YouTube. And audio podcasts where I've got like really, really good reach, it's not like I get any direct dollars and cents from that. That would be more like if somebody wants to donate or help. I don't have any sponsors because I mean, I don't want to answer to anybody except for the people who are listening, maybe. But even then, like I don't make this show for the people who don't like it. So I don't know what to tell the algorithm or the listeners about that. I got constant access to people and they've got constant access to me, but where's the emotional availability? Because when we're communicating in this heavily regulated environment, we're forced to curate the things that we say and express so carefully that the emotion of what we've got to say to each other is stripped out. It's like in this, like, I used to think political correctness was the enemy, but holy crap, like over the last 3 years, for sure, like it's got me longing for the days where some Karen would say, well, you can't say that in public. Because that was just one person. I wasn't dealing with a whole fucking algorithm that was designed to shut me up. I'm not even dealing with people anymore. I'm not dealing with the people that have a problem, and I'm not dealing with people who don't have a problem because this ability for us to connect emotionally, to be available to each other, it's been so heavily restricted that most of us don't even try anymore. Connecting with others, it used to mean being there in some real way. Now it just means that we're technically available. And being technically available isn't the same thing as being intimately connected. The other thing is like I feel like common sense, it's not just dying. Common sense is dead. Like it's really, really, really messed up. We've got tutorials, we've got guides, and we've got explainers for absolutely fucking everything. But somehow people don't know shit. For example, people can Google, and I hate to even use the word Google. It's become a swear word in my life. People can use a search engine to look up how to fix pretty much anything, but they can't troubleshoot basic problems. The knowledge is there, but the instinct to use it is gone. We've outsourced problem solving to the internet so completely that I think we've forgotten how to think without that resource. Whatever happened to just trying to remember how to do a thing that you were taught when you were younger, how to remember, okay, somebody showed me how to make this recipe. How do I do that? How do I change this part on my car? What does it mean when my washing machine makes that rattle? Like, I know I've been here before. I've dealt with it, but what was the solution? We don't take the 10 minutes because it's so easy to stick our hand in our pocket and pull the phone out and Google eyes, okay, what's up with that? And it leaves me wondering, like, how can we be drowning in information while at the same time starving for any shred of wisdom? And there's the background noise, the cultural static, music, art, ads, everything is being fed through the same algorithm that's fucking up everything else. songs. It used to be a case of like you knew who an artist was because I mean people had distinct sounds. I could tell the difference between like Aerosmith and AC/DC and the Rolling Stones and Boston and whoever else. And granted, this is music I'm more familiar with than the new stuff, but I mean, like the new stuff at a glance, it all kind of sounds the same. Even if there's like a newer song that on some level I kind of like, I'm hard pressed to tell you who did it because all the artists, all their music, it sounds effectively the same. And even this, like I was just complaining a moment ago about how people don't take the time to sit there and try to remember, okay, like what's what are the facts here? I'm guilty of it here. Like where music is concerned, I'm constantly fighting this urge because like I've got an app on my phone where if there's a song playing, if I just tap this little thing, it'll tell me the artist, it'll tell me the name of the song, and it'll give me a link to whoever's performing it. This is something that's just baked into the Android operating system, and it's a really, really cool thing. But two problems with that. One is I'm not using my brain to try to think, okay, who is this? The other thing is I need this to tell me who it is because no matter how much time I spend thinking about it, I'm never going to pick this artist I like or hate out of the lineup because it's just they're all coming out of the same generic mass-produced mold. Brands, like company brands. You ever looked at like the way fast food restaurants looked like years ago compared to how they look now? You know, like I watched this video where somebody had basically used Photoshop to remove the logos and the branding off of the buildings and the windows, and then said, "Okay, tell me which is which." I couldn't tell. They all look like gray boxes. Whereas Pizza Hut used to look like Pizza Hut, McDonald's looked like McDonald's, Burger King looked like Burger King. It's like even like when you look at some of these old buildings, if a paint store moves into an old building, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that used to be the Dairy Queen. You could tell by the architecture, but now, like no, when a new restaurant's being built, up until the moment the signage goes up, you don't even know what's going in. And the way companies pitch themselves, like the advertising, like where's the originality in anything? Everybody's just I don't know. It's like, I can't even say they're copying each other. It's just like they're just so everybody's so dedicated to the generic because you don't want to upset anybody. You don't want to risk alienating or forgetting about anybody. You sure don't want to offend anybody. And if you keep things generic enough, then nobody can accuse you of stealing their ideas because they're being just as generic and motivated by all the same stupid things. But the result is we end up living in a very boring, textureless, and like just bland world that is lacking in any sort of personality. And I don't know if it's just nostalgia talking, but I mean, for me personally, I miss when culture had texture, when everything wasn't optimized for engagement, when it wasn't engineered to avoid offense and controversy, when people could just say things and then see where they landed. And again, like it takes me back to like I'm not saying that like we should live in a world where people are free to be jerks, but I think we should live in a world where people risk coming across as one. Because if a company says something, if they run an ad campaign that turns out to be offensive, again, it starts conversation. It gets us talking. It gets us thinking about the things that bother us, and it gets us thinking about why these things bother us. Which quite often, I mean, if I'm speaking from personal experience, thinking along those lines is what's caused me to grow because there's times where I realize, you know what, like I'm really, really offended by something. When I ask myself, why am I offended? I can't come up with a reason for that. You know, like I for many years was a Christian, and I had, you know, I know it's kind of like a meaningless way to describe things, but I had what I would have described as like, you know, traditional Christian values. And one of those values was that I was very, very pro-life, very, very anti-abortion. And after I deconverted from Christianity, I was able to comfortably put aside a lot of these ideas and beliefs that I had had. But I was surprised at one point because I heard that somebody indirectly connected to me was seeking out birth control in the form of terminating a pregnancy, and my knee-jerk reaction was in my head to think, "Oh, yeah, that's just wrong." And then my second reaction was to think, "Wait, why?" And I spent a lot of time thinking about the why. Thankfully, I never went and like ran with this knee-jerk and said anything hurtful or shitty to the other person. But I was able to like dig through things, and I realized that, you know what, I don't have any good reason to be pro-life since that time. I can't say like that day because it took a few days to sort through it all. But because my position was challenged internally, because I was offended, I was able to overhaul my worldview. And now instead of being a person who sits there quietly thinking, oh, well, I don't really like abortion, I don't really go for that, I'm an outspoken advocate for women's rights. I will fight for a woman's access to all forms of healthcare, including birth control, including abortion. If you don't have somebody to go with you to the clinic, I'll go with you. Like, I feel passionately about this. And it was all because I was bothered. All because, like, somebody risked saying something controversial. And when we strip the controversy out of things, well, then we strip much of the opportunity for growth. And I think that is a devastating loss. You know, and lastly, like, I think about the inner conflict that I have. There's this part of me that wants to adapt, that wants to stay plugged in, and that wants to figure out how to keep up with the way things are moving and to embrace these cultural shifts. But there's the other part of me, and like you may have guessed by now, the louder part of me just wants to shut it all off. You know, maybe me being grounded now means resisting the constant pull on someone else's schedule. Maybe staying human means slowing down when everything else seems to be speeding up. I don't have an answer yet. I'm just noticing that the more connected I get, the less sense the world seems to make. And maybe that's the signal I'm supposed to listen to. Anyways, if you got thoughts on this or anything else I've spoken about, reach out. Obviously not on social media, but check out my website. I'll put the link down below. For those listening to the audio podcast, it'll be in the show notes. On my website is a little bit about me, what I've been working on. There's also my email address if you would like to reach out, set up a video chat, a phone call, or just to pop a couple of messages back and forth. I would be totally into that. But if you're looking for superficial connections, or if you want to sell me something, you can go fuck yourself. Talk to you next week, guys.